Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Tournament Podcast. This is Marty, as always, with my brothers Tom and Mike. And if anyone knows me, you guys know that my roots definitely are planted within the professional wrestling genre. So, as usual, we're going back to pro wrestling. This week, I'm doing something a little bit different. This is going to be the best tag team of all time. Now, for the sake of not having a 2 hour podcast, what I've done this week is I've actually chosen the top 10 tag teams, and the first two teams will have a bye. And
I
I
know who
actually
one of
put,
those is.
oh, I'm sure you do. Um, I put a pretty extensive amount of research into this, believe it or not. I used many different resources to gather who the quote unquote top tag teams were, some of which, Bleacher Report, um, Sports Illustrated, believe it or not, .com. But I relied also somewhat heavily on Pro Wrestling Illustrated's 100 best tag teams during the PWI years. Now, that publication was released in 2003, so it may be dated, but again, if you know me, I tend to skew towards the old school. So this mainly encompasses from the 80s to probably 2000, I will say. But before we get into the list of the tag teams, if you have been enjoying our content, please consider liking, subscribing, sharing, and most importantly, commenting. If you're liking the videos, if we're missing something or your opinion differs, let us know. We'll definitely respond to you. Um, Let me jump in here to the list of the tag teams that I had chosen. The first tag team, probably no surprise, and they will get a bye, is going to be the Road Warriors. They are a one time NWA Tag Team Champion, one time AWA Tag Team Champion, one time All Japan Tag Champ, and two-time WWF Tag Team Champ. We have the Midnight Express, who has held multiple regional titles. They had an NWA title run, three NWA US tag runs. Then we have the Rock and Roll Express. Again, multitude of territorial tag belts, including four NWA. The next team, I decided to also give this team the other bye. This is the Steiner Brothers. The Steiner Brothers have done it all. They are a seven-time NWA/WCW tag champ, two IWGP and two WWF. Then we have the Hart Foundation, the Dudley Boyz, Edge and Christian, the Hardy Boys, the Freebirds, and last but certainly not least, Harlem Heat, who is a 10-time WCW Tag Team Champion. This list was so hard to make, and there might be a couple names in there that are shockers, but again, I used a lot of different criteria and based off like titles, etc. It was so good. Some of the first teams that were out were Terry Gordy and Steve Williams, aka the Miracle Violence connection. I mean, they were former one-time WCW, one-time NWA, and a five-time All Japan Tag Champ. Tully and Arn barely missed the cut.
Yeah. And I was actually I was gonna kid and say, oh, he left Tully and Arn off the list, but I didn't because I realized how absolutely grueling it must have been to put together this list.
Oh, it is,
Yeah.
or it was. And yeah, Tully and Arn were like the first or second team out, and then the British Bulldogs.
Oh
There
wow.
were
Yeah.
a litany of other teams that could have made it in kind of what I consider one-offs, like not that they were a one-off, but Dusty Nikita, they did team for
Well,
probably a year.
yeah, I mean, you have the
Um,
Midnight Rockers, who were a hell
yeah,
of a team.
absolutely.
The New Age Outlaws.
Yeah, they were a good tag team. There's a lot of them
Yeah, the
now.
Fantastics.
Exactly, Sheep Herders, tons of tag teams that unfortunately didn't make the cut. Now, I'll be honest, one of the teams that surprised me putting them in here, and this is no knock on their individual skills
I
at
think
all.
I know who you're going to say, but Edge. I thought you said the Dudley Boys.
No, the Dudley Boys. Just to kind of let you know, the Dudley Boys are 9-time WWF Tag Champions, 8-time ECW, 3-time TNA, 2-time IWGP, and 1-time WCW. That was the WWF's, reiteration. But the Dudley Boys are highly, accomplished tag team. Edge and Christian, they're 7-time WWF Tag Team Champions, and just some of the matches in this TLC, matches they had were just insane.
Yeah.
So, and as always, everyone, this is a tournament format. If two of us agree, but one of us does not, we always have one veto each episode that we can use. Now, before I jump in, I've put everybody in our proprietary tournament generator. Do either of you guys have anything or anything I missed?
Nothing you missed. I just want to say, if everybody is excited to see what these brackets are and who is facing who in the first round, go ahead and drop us a like if you would on the video. Subscribe to the channel. We can use all the support we can get. And the thumbs up also give us a nice indication of the type of content that you like to see from us. So that will help us continue forward with pro wrestling. So thank you.
Yep, absolutely. And, again, one of the reasons that this is just a 10-team tournament is for the sake of trying to make the video not quite as long. Some of the videos have been 2 hours. So this is sort of a test. It's also just doing something a little different. But the Road Warriors will get a bye, and they will face the winner of the Midnight Express and Harlem Heat. Then we have the Dudley Boys will be going against Edge and Christian. On the other side, the Steiner Brothers have a bye. They will be going up against the winners of the Hart Foundation and the Hardy Boys. And then the last bracket, the Rock and Roll Express versus the Freebirds. So this should be hot and heavy as always with us. And
now, and can I jump in real quick? And this is your show, so I'm going to ask your permission.
Do it.
Would you be okay if we unleashed something here and we tried to do a timer? So each one of our responses, we had a time. Now, I mean, obviously, there's going to be times we go over, but that we try to stick to a time.
Sure.
What do you think would be a fair time response to get, keep the podcast rolling, and that way we're not dragging on? Because, I mean, I know sometimes I listen to myself, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? I kind of already stated that, and then I reiterate it. I don't need to reiterate it. I just need to move on.
Is 2 minutes too long?
Well, I pulled up a timer and I put in 2 minutes. That was my initial thought. So,
I mean,
sounds good.
Yeah.
And then I'll just keep track of it as we go. So,
yeah, I like to think they have a lot of information and thoughts to convey. But yeah, let's use this. Crush, if anything, likes to experiment. So let's do it.
All right.
Okay. Well, without further ado, we can jump right in here. So the first matchup that we're going to have, again, the Road Warriors with a bye will go up against the winner of the Midnight Express and Harlem Heat. And real quick for the I can't think of the
criteria.
word. Yeah, thank you. For the criteria here, the first thing I think is important and we should start with is just basically their legacy. What they mean to the business and still mean. Then after that, I would say, um, you know, tag titles, basically their success. And if we need a tiebreaker, I always kind of throw in, even though sometimes it can be difficult, but like best matches. So, and if all else fails, obviously we try to use the criteria, but you go with your heart too.
Yep.
So, all right, Midnight Express versus Harlem Heat. Mike, you want to start this one?
Sure, I'll get us going here. Wow, none of these are going to be easy just from looking at the bracket we got here so far. But oh man, as far as legacy, that's a tough one. I know the Midnight Express are often referred to as the best, or if not one of the best tag teams of all time. I feel like Harlem Heat tends to get overlooked sometimes. Man, I'm just gonna go with my gut and say legacy. I'll go Midnight Express. Tag titles, you gotta go Harlem Heat. I believe the Midnight Express were maybe at least one time. I think they may have only been, was it one time, World Tag Team Champions? I could be wrong, but I know they were multi-time U.S. Tag Champs. Harlem Heat, on the other hand, won the World Tag titles, I believe, upwards of 10 times.
Right.
So just based on that, you got to, of course, go with Stevie Ray and Booker for the tag titles. Best matches. Oh, man, I love Harlem Heat, but there's not a whole lot of their matches that jump out as much as with the Midnight Express. You have obviously the Rock and Roll Express feud is legendary. The matches with the Fantastics. They had matches with the Southern Boys.
Oh, they did.
So yeah, they had a lot of epic matches and big time feuds. So again, I love Harlem Heat. They're one of my personal favorites, but based on the criteria, best matches have to go to the Midnight. So the Midnight are taking it 2-1 for me.
That's perfect. Is the timer? There it goes. You literally got it just in the 2-minute mark.
Oh.
All right.
I know how to time things.
Tom, you want to go next?
Yeah. Let me touch really quickly on the titles. Sometimes that can be deceiving, because in order to be the 10-time champions, you had to lose it, at least 9 times. So
Yeah.
it made, you might have one long run versus 10 short runs. So I try not to look as much into that. I'm going to really put a lot of weight, at least on my answer, just on the legacy. And like all these, this is a very tough one. We love Harlem Heat. Obviously, Booker T has been a member of a past tournament that we have worked out on the tournament podcast, and he actually won. So, actually, I think he may have been in a few of ours, but I know he's won at least one of our podcast tournaments. But the Midnight Express, and I know that there's one Harlem Heat. There was a few iterations of the Midnight Express, but I mean, the two major, Bobby obviously with both. You had Loverboy Dennis Condrey and Sweet Stan Lane, and then of course Jim Cornette, a staple with both of those teams as well. I just think the legacy there. I mean, well, it's just my opinion. I just think the Midnight Express are just a tick above Harlem Heat. So, yeah, I mean, I'm just going to go with my gut. I'm not going to go through the titles or talk about matches or anything. I'm just going to say, in my opinion, the Midnight Express. oh, geez Louise, I'm sorry. I have 10 seconds left here. In my opinion, I'm going to go with Loverboy Dennis and Beautiful Bobby, the Midnight Express.
Nice. So we already have 2-0 for Midnight Express. So I either would agree or I could use my veto. In this particular instance, let me start out. Actually, rarely are we serious on the podcast, but on a very serious note, R.I.P. to beautiful Bobby Eaton. Thoughts and prayers to his family and friends. One of the not greatest wrestlers of all time, but everyone loved him. I've never heard anyone say a bad word in any of the shoot interviews or just interviews period about Bobby Eaton. Everyone has positive things to say about Bobby.
Yeah.
So not only a great wrestler but a great guy. So R.I.P. to him, just one of the greatest. Um, this particular one, oh man, it is tough, but I'm going to agree with you guys. And unfortunately, I think I need to try to be definitely more, objective, but I'm so tied in more to the old school. Booker T is literally in my definitely my top 10 favorite wrestlers of all time, no question. Harlem Heat was fantastic. The only thing with them of their title victories, they had like a title win against I think American Males and a couple what I would consider lesser teams, Buckhouse Bung in someone. They have defeated some top teams, don't get me wrong, but the Midnight Express are just all-time legends in the business. They've done it all throughout NWA and other territories. So I will agree with you guys, and this will be a clean sweep for the Midnight Express.
Nice.
All right, jumping over to the next round here, we're going to have the Dudley Boyz going against Edge and Christian. And Tom, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. So Edge and Christian, obviously, and as Marty mentioned earlier on in the podcast, he said, if you know me, you know that, he likes pro wrestling and does a lot of his tournaments are pro wrestling related. By the same token, if you know me, I don't like the WWF or the WWE. So I like Christian a little bit better now that he's in AEW. But even with that being said, I try to always be as unbiased as possible. And I also have to admit I've seen more Dudley Boyz just in ECW and TNA than I have Edge and Christian because I just didn't watch that product. But I do know how popular and dominant they were. But with that being said, in terms of a tag team, a long-running, like a Road Warriors type, or even Midnight Steiner Brothers, Rock and Roll Express, just they're together. Bubba Ray and Devon are just, they're like linked. Where Edge and Christian, didn't they come in with the Vampire guy? And then I guess they split and they were their own tag team, and then they went singles and.
Right.
Gangrel.
Yes, yeah, which was cool. The Brood, I think they were. Yeah.
Nice.
But with all that, little tidbits thrown in there, I just think the Dudley Boyz check the boxes for me in terms of like legacy, in terms of a solid tag team, at least over a longer period of time. So I've got 10 seconds left, so I'm going with the Dudley Boyz.
Nice. All right, Mike, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, let's see. Legacy. You got to go Dudley's, Edge and Christian. Were a very successful tag team. But of course they were, I don't remember exactly how long they were together. Maybe 4 years, something like that, give or take. But of course both men went went on to have successful singles careers. The Dudleys, on the other hand, when they tried that with them in the early 2000s, it was what, Reverend Devon, and I don't even recall what they tried to do with Bubba Ray as a single, but it just didn't work. The fans just wanted them two together as the Dudley Boys. So, yeah, the legacy, and they've, I think they were still together as of a handful of years ago. So, what, 25 years, give or take? So, you got to go the Dudley Boys. Tag titles, I'm going to go the Dudleys as well. Edge and Christian, I believe, won 7 or 8 tag championships, which the Dudleys more or less matched in the WWE. But then keeping in mind what they did in ECW as well, where they were also multi-time tag team champions, the Dudleys probably have twice as many tag titles as Edge and Christian do. So just based on that, you got to go with Bubba Ray and Devon. Best matches, this one's kind of a wash for me because the most memorable matches for both these teams, they were actually both involved in. All those ladder matches or TLC matches they had, along with Matt and Jeff Hardy, who we'll be discussing here shortly. Yeah, both those teams were involved in most of those matches together, so they kind of cancel each other out. But I went legacy and tag titles with the Dudleys, so I'm going with Bubba Ray and Devon to move on.
All right. So we have our second 2-0 here for the Dudley Boys. So that comes to me. Either I agree or I could use a veto, which this matchup is so close, I certainly would not use a veto. The Dudley Boys, you're correct. They not only matched, but it looks like they exceeded Edge and Christian by 2 as far as tag team title runs in the WWF. They did dominate in ECW with 8 title victories. Now, I don't know how deep the ECW tag team division was. I remember the Eliminators.
Oh, the Pit Bulls.
Oh, okay. Or yeah, did they have a group, the Eliminators, or am
I think they did, yeah.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah. So I don't know if it was the deepest, but they've had worldwide success in Japan, etc. Edge and Christian, again, they actually shocked me making this list. I'm not gonna lie, they're both very talented, but as a tag team, I remember them from the epic, as Mike said, like TLC matches with the Hardys and the Dudley Boys. But they're 7-time tag champs. But without ongoing here, I will. I'll agree with you guys, and I'm going to go with the Dudleys for our second clean sweep of the day.
All right.
And that will bring us to the next matchup here, which is going to be the Hart Foundation going up against the Hardy Boys. And I will actually go ahead and take this one first. The Hardy Boys, just to start out again, I guess I can't call them a surprise because they're extremely talented, but in and out of the ring. I mean, the Hardys are 7-time WWF tag champs, Ring of Honor champs, TNA tag champs. So they've done a lot in this business, and they definitely, if they ever had the stigma when they first started as like a pretty boy tag team, they definitely threw that out the window with the physical TLC matches and just some of the things they do, especially Jeff Hardy with the death-defying stunts. You have to call them stunts that he do. But the Hart Foundation, to me, when you look at legacy, and I'm a pro wrestling fan, I definitely skew a lot more towards NWA/WCW. But the 80s, early 80s, or mid 80s WWF, I was a fan of at that time. The Hart Foundation, to me, they were the tag team division at that point. They feuded with the British Bulldogs primarily. It wasn't the deepest division. They had the Killer Bees, some other tag teams, but you have Bret Hart alone, who was one of the greatest technicians of all time. And then you add in the power of the and the might of Jim the Anvil. The Hart Foundation were the WWE to me, or WWF, two-time tag champs. The Hardy Boys have more titles, certainly, but again, as Tom mentioned, that can kind of be skewed as well. Legacy, I'm going with
Oop,
Hart
that's
Foundation.
the
I
time,
hear
by the
my
way.
timer.
Yep.
I'm the first one to blow it.
Oh, that's good. You guys can hear it?
Yep.
Oh, perfect.
Yep.
All right.
I'm the first one to blow it. Hardys have the title, so boy, best matches. This is a tough one, but oh man, I'm old school. I can't believe I'm going to say this. I'm actually going to go with the Hardy Boys. I'm shocked in myself. Tom, do you want to go next?
Yes. This is, well, just seeing, and knowing what's coming up on the bracket here, I can clearly say this is the most difficult one for me. And, mentioning the WWF, WWE, that goes out the window with this one because I know the Hart Foundation and the Hardy Boys. And it's interesting because I would immediately think the Hart Foundation has to be the greatest tag team in the history of the WWE. But the Hardy Boys are just something unique and special. I do like the way the Hart Foundation, like you said, had the speed and intensity and just, you mentioned technician, but just generally one of the greatest professional wrestlers to ever live with Bret. And then you got the polar opposite in, Jim the Anvil Neidhart with, the power. Kind of like a Harlem Heat where, Stevie Ray, provided the power. Not that Booker T wasn't big and powerful too, but he did have a little bit more agility and speed. So it's nice when you have teams like that, unlike the Road Warriors that were just straight power, that they've got a balance. But the Hardy Boys, first of all, which again I don't know because I'm not too tied in, and I'm going long here, too tied into the news and the beliefs of the Hardy Boys, but it seems to me that Jeff Hardy is just underrated. Just a fantastic professional wrestler. And not that Matt is not very good as well, just like Jim, but this is hard because I said I'm going to focus on legacy. So the legacy, you'd have to go with the Hart Foundation. They're just one of the all-time greats, period. But there's just something in the heart gut part that, we said if we need it, that is just pushing me to the Hardy Boys. And I like Jeff. I think the world of Jeff Hardy. And my timer's about to go off. I'm going to say the Hardy Boys. I'm going to shock myself, I think, and say the Hardy Boys.
Ooh, so we've got two shockers here. 2-0 for the Hardy Boys,
Yeah.
Mike. You can either agree, or if you're passionate enough, you can use your veto for the Hart Foundation.
I do have my veto, but I will not be using it.
Nice.
A little bit of a spoiler there. The legacy, we've said like Bret Hart specifically, one of the best of all time. But as a tag team, you got to go with the Hardys, in my opinion, for legacy. Just, all the high flying stuff they did to this day, that's a big part of professional wrestling. A lot of these young tag teams that do, high spot after high spot and all these crazy flips and all that, you could probably credit that to the Hardy Boys in part. So I'm going to say the Hardys for legacy. tag titles, by default, you got to go with the Hardys. I believe the Hart Foundation were 2-time, at least in the original form of Brett and Jim the Anvil Neidhart, were 2-time tag champs, where Matt and Jeff, I believe, were 6-time tag team champions. And again, that was WWE or WWF. I know they've also, of course, been in TNA or Impact, and so they've won upwards of 10 tag titles probably as a whole. So, and then best matches again. Hart Foundation had some good matches, but those Hardy Boys matches again with Edge and Christian jump out as some of the best maybe of all time. Those steel I can't even talk. Those steel showing matches that they had at WrestleMania and SummerSlam. So yeah, with a clean sweep, I'm going with the Hardy Boys as well.
Wow, I can't believe this.
And again, that's with all due respect to the Hart Foundation, because Jim was a beast, and like I said, Brett, obviously one of the best of all time. So
I'm shocked as well. Not only we've had 3 clean sweeps to start this tournament, but I did not think the Hardy Boys would make it out of the first round against the Hart Foundation, but yet I picked the Hardy Boys. So that is a shocker. The last bracket here of the first round is going to be the Rock and Roll Express versus the Freebirds. And Mike, you're first on this one.
wow, this is an interesting matchup, because on one hand you have the Rock and Roll Express, who were engaged in one of the biggest feuds of all time with the Midnight Express, but then you have the Freebirds, who were engaged in that epic years-long feud with the Von Erichs down in Texas. So it's, man, legacy though. Whew. Oh man, this is a tough one, but the legacy, I'm actually gonna go, and I'll explain this. I'm gonna go with the Freebirds. Kind of the main reason for me going with the Freebirds is, to this day, you have these tag teams that include like the New Day, where there's 3 of them, but any 2 members can defend the tag titles. They still, I believe, refer to that as the Freebird rule in a lot of circles. So obviously, all these years later, these 40 plus years, the Freebirds are still talked about quite a bit. Not to say Ricky and Robert aren't, but just based on that, I'm gonna use that as my way to decide between these 2 teams, because damn is it hard. So I'm going with the Freebirds for legacy. Tag titles, I believe that has to be. I'd be lying if I said I knew exactly how many tag titles either one of these teams won, but my gut tells me that Ricky and Robert probably held more gold than the Freebirds did. So I'm gonna go with my gut and say Ricky and Robert for the tag titles. The best matches, man. Well, Ricky and Robert, obviously had to have had the better matches. They were more athletic. They were going against the Midnight Express. And those matches, again, are all-time classics. The Freebirds, on the other hand, even though that Von Erich feud is legendary, beside, Terry Gordy, Michael, was good on the mic, not the best worker. Buddy Roberts was there too. But best matches, I'm gonna have to go Rock and Roll. So 2-1, I'm taking Ricky and Robert over the Freebirds.
No, I will go next on this one. This is a good matchup, and these teams did have a feud in the late 80s, I believe it was, in WCW. But when you're talking about legacy, Mike, that was perfect when you talked about the Freebird rule. But also the legacy of the Express. Whenever you hear someone talk about, this wrestler can sell, this wrestler gets
Yeah.
so much sympathy. They always say it's, the Ricky Morton effect, or, it's like Ricky Morton.
That's true.
Ricky and Robert Stell, like no one's business. The legacy that they have is a tag team. The Freebirds, if you're talking about 6-man tag, I would obviously go with the Freebirds, but I'm going to give the slight edge to the R&R tag team titles. Both of these teams have held numerous regional titles. Rock and Roll were 4-time NWA, 3-time Mid-South. They think they were some type of South Korean tag team champions, and just was it this year that they were NWA tag champs at the age of 60 something? I mean, come on.
It looked like 20, so 2 years ago. Yep.
Yeah, the Rock and Roll Express best matches. Mike hit the nail on the head. They had a couple years long feud with the Midnight Express, so I'm going to agree with Mike, and I'm going with the Rock and Roll Express. Tom, 2-0 for R&R. You either agree or you've got your veto.
Yep. Luckily, still have the veto. This is probably the easiest one for me. And again, none of the teams would have made this list unless they are, one of the absolute greats of all time. However, I just think the Rock and Roll Express are in rarefied air. And the Freebirds maybe penalized a little bit because they are a 3-man unit. And I think we'd all, well, I don't know if we would all agree. I mean, I think the best wrestler of the bunch, again, I think, as I mentioned, Jeff Hardy, I think a grossly underrated all-time performer is Terry Gordy. Phenomenal, as I term it, as offensively and defensively, with the cell and just his move set. Just fantastic. And I know Buddy Jack was kind of like their Ricky Morton in a way, and Michael was Michael. I mean, one of the greatest talkers of all times, or I said of all times. I hate when people do that, all time. But I'd say those things just as a little bit of, kudos to the Freebirds, but I am going with the Rock and Roll Express as well. I don't know if they really get the dues sometimes, maybe because they were two smaller guys for the business, but just fantastic tag team. I mean, obviously had the female demographic wrapped around their their fingers. But I mean, what a draw! What exciting matches! I mean, just one of the absolute all-time greats. And not that the Freebirds aren't, but anyway, I'm going with the Rock and Roll Express.
And I asked which one had the female fans.
Oh.
The Rock and Roll or the Freebirds?
Well, yeah, we could get into something that I would probably have to edit out of this video, so we won't do that. But
and just to throw this out there, so far we've had 4 brackets. We've had 4 clean sweeps.
yeah,
So
that is
we're
rare.
in tune right now. So that was the first round. Now we're going into the second round, where the first matchup is going to be the Midnight Express was victorious over Harlem Heat, but they go against the first round seed that had a bye, the Road Warriors. Tom, you are first, I believe, on this.
Okay. Well, I like this matchup because it's certainly in my wheelhouse. This is what I liked, old school NWA. This is a tough one because the Road Warriors got a bye for a reason. I mean, pretty much, I think if you just polled wrestling fans, old and young, the Road Warriors probably would come out to, I mean, maybe not with the younger demographic as much, and they know the Legion of Doom, but the Road Warrior iteration of these guys would probably get the vote as the greatest tag team of all time. Doesn't mean they'll win this tournament because in our tournament we have certain criteria and matchups are everything. But in terms of a tag team, they were like Shaquille O'Neal. I've always said, I don't think Shaquille O'Neal is one of the greatest centers of all time because his skill set was so limited. But if you say, was he one of the most dominant? I'm like, well, yeah, he was. besides Wilt, I mean, maybe the most dominant of all time. And that was the Road Warriors. Very limited skill set, but they were so powerful. You know, I mean, what did they do? A power slam, a clothesline, punches, a flying shoulder block. And I think that was the moveset for their whole career pretty much. But they did it well with the Midnight Express. Again, just speaking of Bobby, wow. I mean, you had the whole bag of tricks. I mean, that man could do everything. Whew. And I've got 20 seconds left here. I mean, the Road Warriors are just so iconic, but I mean, the Midnight Express, they just were so versatile, and both iterations were just as good. I'm going to take an overall skill set into the equation here, and so I just lost my time. I'm going to go with an overall skill set, and because legacies are pretty darn close, and I can't believe I'm doing this, I'm going to go with the Midnight Express.
What?
So this might have you guys, this might be our first, split. But yeah, I mean,
Whew.
it'd be easy to see the Road Warriors winning this whole thing, but I'm trying to take a look at, what they brought to the table, what they could do. And I mean, this sounds terrible. They couldn't do much, but it really didn't matter because what they did was so damn good. And they were intimidating and everything else, but anyway.
I still am flabbergasted. Mike,
Let's make this interesting, baby.
Mike, do you want to go next?
Sure. Man, yeah, this is a tough one. I know we say that a lot, but in most cases it is true. Legacy, yeah, I mean, both of these tag teams again are discussed as being the one of the best, if not the best tag team of all time. Man, Legacy, goodness. I'm just gonna go with my gut and say the Road Warriors. And again, all due respect to the Midnight Express and Jim Cornette. Oh, man, against anybody else, they would probably get my vote for Legacy, but against Hawk and Animal, oh man. And I'm just thinking back when I was a kid, I loved the Road Warriors, the makeup. Yeah, so I'm just gonna give that to the Road Warriors. Tag titles is kind of hard because I know I just kind of looked briefly, and both teams have a plethora of tag team championships from all over the world, various promotions, some I've never even heard of. But just kind of focusing on what they did in the bigger, NWA / WCW or WWF, AWA. Overall, man, I'm going to go, I guess, with the Road Warriors. I know the Midnights in JCP, I believe, held more gold. I think the Road Warriors were one-time tag champs, but then they won gold, of course, in AWA, the WWF. So I'm going to just focusing in on the big three there. I'm going to go with Hawk and Animal, best matches. You got to go with any form of the Midnight Express. Again, like Tom said, Hawk and Animal were big and powerful, but of course, Midnight Express, whether it be Bobby and Stan or Bobby and Dennis, were, more workers and put on, of course, a better match, if you will, with the likes of the Fantastics, Rock and Roll Express. So, best matches, I'm gonna go the Midnight, but due to the legacy and my tag titles, I'm going with the Road Warriors 2-1. So, Marty,
boy.
putting you in the hot seat.
Woo, this
What's
is
it gonna
it.
be?
The first tiebreaker scenario. This is an excellent matchup in a lot of ways. The legacy, when you talk about tag team wrestling, I think most people talk about the Road Warriors. the Road Warriors, just based on their overall appeal, the look, they were one of the first teams to have, bodies, the muscle, the look. I mean, honestly, back in the, 60s, 70s, and even in the 80s, a lot of these wrestlers were normal, looking individuals, probably looking better than maybe the average, but you get the drift of what I'm saying. Then the Road Warriors come in, 280, 300 pounds of muscle, the makeup, the legacy. It's closer probably than I'm giving it credit, but I'd have to go with the Road Warriors. Um, Tag titles. Tom mentioned earlier it can be deceiving. And I'm going to say this one's a wash. The Midnight Express definitely have more, probably a lot more tag titles when you factor in regional. They were NWA tag champs, Mid South tag champs, a couple occasions. The Road Warriors I'd mentioned earlier were only a one-time NWA, but one-time AWA, one-time All Japan, two-time WWF. But the Road Warriors were never really booked with the titles because they were that over. They were that good. They were that popular. They didn't need to have the belts. They were like a showcase. People would come to the events just to see them. So it's hard. I'm going to say the titles are a wash based on that. So then the best matches, I mean, you have to go with the Midnight Express for best matches. I mean, whether it's Dennis Condrey or Stan Lane, you still had Bobby Eaton as the constant great, fantastic worker. The Midnight Express revolutionized tag team wrestling. So I'm almost at a wash here, but I just I have to. I'm gonna go with the Road Warriors.
Oh boy.
So Tom, would you use or even consider using your veto to move
Um,
the Midnight Express?
yeah, actually, I would very strongly consider using the veto here. But then I kid. I mean, really, using the veto against the Road Warriors would be. I mean, I wouldn't know what I was talking about. You can't do that. I mean, because they are clearly one of the, if not the greatest tag team of all time. I just focused a little more heavily on the actual in-ring skill set, but certainly not going to use my veto.
And you know what? Let me just say that I really appreciate Tom's extremely objective opinion before. I mean, the easy thing for especially us being old school fans would immediately be the Road Warriors, but he took the criteria to heart. So that was really, I mean, that was insane and kind of a shocker to me, but I was impressed. I was impressed. Um, so we have the Road Warriors moving on to the next round, and that brings us to the Steiner Brothers, who received the second bye, going up against the Hardy Boys, who I think it was a shocker they defeated the Hart Foundation. So I will actually go ahead and I'm going to start this one. This is always an interesting matchup. If we start talking about legacy, the Hardy Boys, we've kind of said everything about them. They may have started out as kind of like a, pretty boy tag team the girls would like, and they won over everyone. I mean, the women love them, men love them. They're tough, they're athletic, they're daredevils. Um, then you have the Steiner brothers, who are legit tough guys and high level wrestlers. Multiple tag titles for them throughout the world as well. Um, I consider the Steiner brothers to possibly even be underrated. I mean, they were both. I mean, Rick was pretty athletic, but Scott, before he, put on probably 50 pounds of muscle, was still in tremendous shape and very muscular, probably 250 easily, and was extremely athletic with the Frankensteiner and some of the other moves. I think the Steiners were underrated. I mean, just tremendous tag team. And the fact that they were brothers makes it neat. This one, whereas the Hardys are no slouches, heck, they went past the Hart Foundation. I have to go with the Steiner brothers. I mean, they're just, again, tag team wrestling personified. Um, Great athletes. I'm going with the Steiner brothers. That's all I can say.
Oh boy.
Tom, you want to jump in next?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's, you've got to be of our generation to really appreciate Scott Steiner. You have to know the young Scott Steiner, the Big Papa Pump version of him, if you will, was a totally different wrestler in many ways. The young Scott was, as we had mentioned in a previous podcast with Chris Canyon, he was an innovator. Scott Steiner literally was an innovator. He created new moves and that we had never seen before. And you're like, well, my God, yeah, he's a big guy, these power moves. No, these weren't power moves. I mean, these were high-flying, lucha type moves out of this huge muscular guy that, were new. I mean, he created them and they were phenomenal. And people use them to this day. And then the Hardy Boys, they again brought something to the table, as we had mentioned earlier on, against the Hart Foundation, just in terms of their daredevil ability and the high flying that people hadn't really seen, at least not in the States, I don't think, to that point. But I would also agree with Marty that I think the Steiners, because again, you just think of Big Papa Pump and what he became, I guess, without going down the road too far. It almost, I don't want to say stains the legacy, but you would forget how good they were together. So for their time and what they did, and even though, I love the Hardy Boys, which is hard for me to say because they are a WWE product, I'm also going to go with the Steiner Brothers in this one. I mean, they were that good back in the day and that innovative.
Nice. Mike, 2-0 for the Steiners. Do you agree, or would you consider using a veto for the Hardy Boys?
Oh no, I agree. I'll keep this relatively short. Yeah, the legacy tag titles. I feel like you got to go with the Steiner brothers again. Like I've said about the Road Warriors or Midnight Express, they're always in that conversation. One of the best tag teams of all time. Hardys are definitely one of the best WWF/WWE tag teams of all time. But if you're just saying overall throughout the annals of wrestling history, the Steiners are going to be above Matt and Jeff. Tag titles, the Steiner brothers, even though Matt and Jeff have, I believe, had more tag titles, the Steiners, pretty much owned those belts for a period of time there in the late 90s or the late 80s, early 90s. They never lost. They were almost like the tag team equivalent to Hulk Hogan. It didn't work for them, brother. So they did not lose ever. They basically owned those tag titles. Oh, man. So even though the Hardys had more tag titles, actually, I'll just call that one a wash because the Steiners maybe didn't have as many tag title victories. But like I said, they basically owned those belts. Nobody could take them off of them. So, and then best matches, you're going to go with, man. Again, I keep coming back to those damn TLC matches with the Hardys. the Steiners had some darn good matches as well with Doom and the Samoan SWAT team. I'm sure they faced off with the Midnight Express as well. But yeah, the Hardys, I got to give the best matches. But in this case, Legacy, I'm going to go with that over the best matches. As much as I appreciate the Hardys, and again, I loved them when I was younger, but yeah, Rick and Scott were both beasts, and like Tom said, innovators, and man, so, with a slight edge, I'm gonna go with the Steiner Brothers as well.
And just a quick reminder, everybody, before we move on to the second round of this tournament, if you have not already done so, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. Show us a little support. We certainly need all that we can get. As you can probably see currently by our subscriber count and view counts, we are a very small channel, but growing. We like to consider ourselves small but mighty. So any love would be appreciated. So thank you very much.
Neat. All right. Well, we have got our semifinals all set here. The first matchup of the semifinals is going to be the Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors, going up against the Dudley Boyz. Mike, I want to go ahead and take this one first.
Sure. Whew. Yeah, again, man, with all due respect to the Dudley Boyz, it's going to be hard for anybody to knock off Hawk and Animal when it comes to legacy. Because again, in my opinion, the best tag team of all time, and I'm sure in a lot of people's opinions. But so right out of the gate, I'm going Hawk and Animal, legacy, tag titles. Again, that's another hard one. I'm sure the Dudleys have probably held more gold, but both these teams held tag titles all over the damn world, all over the country. So, man. Yeah, I guess, goodness.
Yeah.
I guess I'll go, and it's odd. I guess I got to go with the criteria, because the Dudleys won, 8 in the WWF, 8 in ECW, and God knows how many elsewhere, so I'm going to go, I guess, Dudley's with the tag team titles. Best matches. Oh, is this bizarre? Because the best matches, again, I got to go with the Dudleys. Keep going back to those damn TLC matches where the Road Warriors had good matches, but can you, besides like that scaffold match back at Starrcade 86 with the Midnight Express, there aren't a whole lot of classics that jump out, where the Dudleys, again, you got all those classic matches, not even just the TLCs, but I'm sure they had other matches too with the Hardys and or Edge and Christian. So yeah, best matches, I'm going Dudleys. Man, is this bizarre. Just, again, like we always say, matchups and criteria. My personal favorite is Hawk and Animal. I love the Road Warriors, but Dudleys did hold more. See, I'm all flustered. The Dudleys did hold more gold. And again, going back to those classic TLC matches, I'm going to give them the best matches. So, using criteria 2-1, God, is this bizarre.
What?
I guess the Dudley Boyz.
Can somebody cut his mic off?
Oh, no.
Wow.
Again, I'm just going by the criteria.
Get that idiot off the air.
Blame Marty, folks. The criteria.
Well, Tom, I need a minute. Do you want to go next here? Semifinals, Road Warriors?
I will. Yeah. So let me start my timer. Yeah, I'm going to just kind of read. I haven't really done this too much. I've kind of been just sticking to legacy and skill set, or I guess I should say heart gut. But legacy, I think, not to the Dudley Boyz or, any kind of a They're fantastic is what I'm getting at, but I think if you even list like your Mount Rushmore of tag teams, I don't care who you are, the Road Warriors are on that Mount Rushmore. I don't think the Dudley Boyz are. So legacy, I'd say the Road Warriors. Titles, success, again, that's a tough one. And I really was a fan of the AWA Road Warriors, more so even than the NWA, and certainly the WWF Legion of Doom. Best matches, I think you would have to go with the Dudleys, as Mike said, because again, I can't go back on what I said. The Road Warriors truly were very limited. I mean, so they couldn't do much. Their excitement was just in the brutality and how quick they could finish the match, and could somebody beat them? That was always the big thing that kind of drew you into those matches. Mike mentioned the scaffold match, and yeah, I mean, I know what he's saying in terms of like a classic match, but in terms of the match, I don't know. I think maybe it was a kick and a punch, and the guys were scared to death up there, so that actually was terrible booking. And then we go to Heart Gut, and Heart and Gut just tell me the Road Warriors. Obviously, I picked the Midnight Express in the last round, but again, matchups are everything. That is the tagline here at the Tournament Podcast. And as I have 10 seconds remaining on my timer, I am going to go with the Road Warriors. So, Marty, you are stuck with a split.
All right. A tiebreaker of monumental proportions here. Road Warriors and Dudley Boyz. Well, the legacy again, the Dudley Boyz have got back bananas for themselves. I think they're arguably, of the quote-unquote modern era, the most decorated tag team. And again, you can kind of weigh that how you want, because like I said before, when it came to tag team titles, the Road Warriors did not need titles. They just had to be on the marquee, and people were going to come to the matches to watch them. They were, a spectacle, so to speak. They were the Road Warriors, so rarely were they booked to have the gold. The Dudleys, like I said, very decorated with titles. I don't know how deep ECW was. They flip-flopped the belts, I think, with the Hardys in WWF several times. But, again, weigh that how you want. But with Legacy, the Road Warriors, to me, are tag team wrestling when you think of it. I mean, again, the body, the look with the makeup, best matches. I agree with you guys. The Legion of Doom were power guys directly. Tom mentioned it. You're going to see some punches, kicks, clotheslines, power slams, but that's how they were booked, and it was done fantastically. So, for me, again, I'm going to go with my gut. Tom had picked the Midnight Express in the second round, which I respected that he went off the criteria like that. That was incredible. I'm going with the Road Warriors. I can't have them eliminate the Midnight Express and then be eliminated by the Dudleys.
The criteria means nothing. Folks.
Yep, I'm being honest. So shoot, in the comments, guys. This is actually my week, my podcast, and I may have just screwed it up and ruined it, but I'm definitely going with the Road Warriors. Now, Mike, do you feel passionate enough about the Dudley Boyz?
Yep.
Oh, I certainly do not. I mean that with all due respect, because like I said, I love Hawk and Animal, and they're arguably one of my favorite tag teams of all time. I just went with the Dudleys, just going off the criteria, but it is a relief, if I'm being honest, that you guys both picked the Road Warriors. So in this case, going against the preset criteria worked out for the best. So,
boy, what did I just? Oh, Marty was just slammed here live on our podcast, guys. But I have no comeback.
It is a relief, actually, though. So yeah, with all due respect, again, to Bubba Ray and Devon, because they are, one of the best, clearly, but yeah, Hawk and Animal are in another stratosphere. So I'm happy to see them move on.
Nut. All right. Our next semifinal matchup is going to be Rick and Scott, the Steiner Brothers, going up against Ricky and Robert of the Rock and Roll Express. This is a good one. Tom, you want to take this one?
I do. This is, I'll try to kind of go through the criteria here. Quick, legacy has to be the Rock and Roll Express. Certainly they were together a lot longer, and as we mentioned, they just, I'll consider it recently won the NWA tag titles again. So, a lot longer run. So in titles and success, I would also say the Rock and Roll Express, and I certainly think they had a bigger fan following. If you want butts and seats, I use this from time to time with these types of podcasts. And you're starting a promotion and you want to hire one of these two teams, I think you hire a prime Rock and Roll Express and you're going to fill your arena. Best matches, I think also has to go to the Rock and Roll Express. And obviously the Midnight come to mind, but I don't know if the Rock and Roll Express had bad matches. So, obviously any sort of combination of them against the Four Horsemen and a million other teams back in the day in the NWA were just phenomenal matches. Heart Gut, though, that as I mentioned, the Steiners, I mean, just because they didn't have the women behind them, if you will, doesn't mean that, they couldn't draw. I mean, they were exciting as all get out. A perfect combination of power and finesse. And as I mentioned, innovators. Whew. So, but I guess really I like Huff and Puff. Like it's a tough decision for me. I just think going through the criteria that it's the Rock and Roll Express all day in this matchup. So I'm going with Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson.
Nice. Mike, do you want to go next on this one?
Sure. Oh, the legacy. Man. The legacy, I think I'm gonna just it's gonna be a wash for me.
Oh no.
No,
I'm sorry, Mike. This is the Rock and Roll Express against the Steiner Brothers.
Oh, it is. What did I say?
Oh, you said the legacy was a wash. You thought maybe it was the Rock and Roll against the Dudleys or something.
Or the Monkeys.
The Steiner Brothers, were, especially in the early 90s, were maybe the biggest tag team in wrestling. Rock and Roll Express were one of the biggest tag teams in wrestling in the 80s. Yeah, I mean, I guess just the fact that the Rock and Roll Express are still doing it, still winning tag team gold at, 60 plus years of age. I guess I will go with the Rock and Roll Express for the legacy. Tag titles, man, it's got to be the Rock and Roll Express again, just because the Steiner Brothers, even though they didn't win as many, it's because they were so dominant that they held the titles for so long. But so in a way, you could kind of, actually that again, I'm gonna cancel those out because you said the Rock and Roll Express held more gold, but the Steiners were more dominant when they held the gold, in my opinion. So they didn't win as many, but they may have held the titles longer. Best matches, you got to go Rock and Roll Express. Yeah, like Tom said, whether it's the Midnight Express or the any form of the Horsemen. I mean, they did have some classics back in the day. So wow. So it looks like, again, going off the criteria with a 2-0 sweep for me, it's going to be the Rock and Roll Express over the Steiner Brothers.
Nice.
Or like Rock and Roll Express.
Nice.
Or yeah, never mind. I'm getting myself all confused.
I said nice.
Tom's getting disgusted. Mike's confused. But we've got the Rock and Roll Express on a 2-0. So I either agree or it could be a veto situation.
Do it.
This one, I
Oh,
mean,
man.
legacy. You have to go with the Rock and Roll Express. I mean, they ruled the '80s regionally and on one of the biggest stages of all, NWA. Rock and Roll Express, basically personified tag team wrestling. And again, their ability to sell, it's like no one else in the business. Tag titles, the Steiners are very decorated, but so were the Rock and Roll Express. Best matches, both of these teams have had some really good matches. The Steiners could work a really interesting style. They could have a somewhat, technical type of a match and somewhat scientific. They've had great matches where there was mainly brawling, like against the Nasty Boys and Havoc. The Steiners were extremely talented, but again, the Rock and Roll Express, I mean, whether they were going up against, the Midnight Express, the Russians, the Andersons, the Midnight Express were workers. I'm going to agree with you guys for the clean sweep on this one and go with the Rock and Roll Express. The Steiners, I said it earlier, I think are probably underrated, but the Rock and Roll Express were that good that, to me, I don't need to go any further. Rock and Roll Express it.
All right.
So, we have come down here, guys, to an extremely intense, pivotal moment. This is what we call the finals. And we have the Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors, going up against Ricky and Robert, the Rock and Roll Express. I'll actually go ahead and take this one first. This is a very interesting matchup. This would have been one that could this have been booked to have them actually wrestle in real life? When you look at the size difference, two totally different skill sets, it would have been interesting. Um, with the legacy, boy, this is like two of the top tag teams of all time, and this is, boy, this is the '80s personified. It is so hard to go with one over the other as far as legacy. This one is almost a wash for me. Tag titles, again, Tom said it perfectly earlier on. The tag titles can be very deceiving because, again, it's based on a lot of things. The booker, are they hot-shotting the territory where they won all these title changes? Um, are they winning and losing, once a month, etc.? Um, so the Rock and Roll Express clearly have more overall title victories, but again, that one's almost a wash. Best matches, though, again, the Road Warriors are the most dominant tag team of all time, but when you come to best workers, it might be the Rock and Roll Express being the best of all time. Boy, this is different, guys.
Here we go.
I'm not exactly sure how to say this, but I've skewed away from the criteria once today. I'm not gonna do it again, especially in the finals. I mean, based on this criteria, I'm gonna do it. I'm going with Ricky and Robert, the Rock Express. I can't believe it.
Wow.
I don't know what
Yuck.
to do.
Now, I mentioned before we started this podcast that I wasn't feeling 100%. I think Marty might be ill with a very high temperature.
Oh, you might be right. It might just be mental illness. I'm going with the rock and roll. Mike, you want to go next?
Wow.
Yeah, please
Sure.
get us back on track here. Jesus.
Yeah, the legacy. I'm gonna give this one to Hawk and Animal. Again, they're referred to, and I know you mentioned earlier, Marty, how people still refer to Ricky selling. Kind of the same thing. The Road Warriors, people still call it the Road Warrior Pop. anytime, there's a big crowd reaction or a big pop, it's typically referred to as a Road Warrior pop. So yeah, the Road Warriors, obviously that tells you right there how over they were, and how, kind of mentioned earlier, the Road Warriors are one of those teams that didn't need the belts to get over, where other teams may need a tag title to get over. The Road Warriors didn't need that. If they were on the marquee, then they were going to sell tickets. Kind of like, what people say about The Undertaker, how he didn't win a whole lot of titles, just the name alone. And, man, to this day, I think a lot of people are probably going to go with the Road Warriors. As far as if you polled people, the best tag team of all time, I think the Road Warriors are still, to this day, going to get a lot of votes. So I'm going to say the Road Warriors for me for the legacy. Tag titles. Man. Again, it's hard to say. I'm going to go a wash on this one just because, both teams have won so many titles, not just in Jim Crockett Promotions or WCW, but Japan and AWA and God knows where else. Both these teams have won tag gold. So best matches, yeah, like I've already said, earlier, by default, you got to go with Ricky and Robert. Hawk and Animal were more for the power, known more for their power, where Ricky and Robert were obviously smaller, more athletic, more scientific, better sellers. I don't think that's a stretch to say. So yeah, best matches, I'm going to go with the Rock and Roll Express. So it looks like I'm 1-1. So I'm going to go with the old the gut/heart to pick my winner. I said as a kid, I was a big fan of the Road Warriors. I loved anybody with makeup. The Road Warriors, Sting, Ultimate Warrior, Muta. So I'm going with Hawk and Animal, damn it. Nostalgia.
Yeah,
Hawk and Animal are moving on.
Okay.
So it's
Alright.
a tiebreaker.
This
Put
puts
Tommy in the hot seat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Tom is in the biggest hot seat he's ever been. The finals.
Well, I
Road
am.
Warriors rocking.
Yep, and I think we're going to shock some folks here. Buckle up, everybody. Legacy, that's difficult for me. That's almost a wash in my eyes. I think probably the Road Warriors / Legion of Doom are more of a household name than the Rock and Roll Express. But the Rock and Roll Express, as we've mentioned 100 times here, are still doing it today. And, their legacy in the business is I think it's equal to the Road Warriors. Titles and success, I agree with Mike on this. I think it's almost got to be a wash. Two of the most successful tag teams, in the history of the business. Best matches, you've got to go with the Rock and Roll Express, because this is going to sound terrible, but I'm just going to say it because it's our podcast and we say what comes to mind. So comment below. I don't know how capable the Road Warriors were of having a great match. I think if you put them in there, as we saw with like the Midnight Express, the Midnight could carry them to a great match, but I don't think they could carry a team to a great match. I just think the two gentlemen were just limited to that power style. Or as Marty had mentioned earlier too, just booked that way, and that's how they were told to wrestle, to compete, which would make perfect sense, because that was their aura. That was what they were all about. So then we go to Heart and Gut, and obviously, this is the tough one here. But I kind of, as you two were talking, I was running through things in my head, and I kind of had my mind made up. So I mentioned buckle up. This is going to be a shocker. I'm going to say the Rock and Roll Express are the greatest tag team of all time.
Yeah.
Now, let me say this. If you look at the way we came to a Final Four, you'd say our Mount Rushmore would be the Steiners, the Road Warriors, the Dudleys, and the Rock and Roll Express. Ironically, And I'm just saying this because I want people to understand what we do here on the Tournament Podcast. It's all about the matchups. My Mount Rushmore would certainly include the Rock and Roll Express and the Road Warriors. Probably I'd go with the Hart Foundation next, and then the Midnight. And you're like, well, wait a minute. You picked the Hardy Boys over the Hart Foundation. But that wasn't what the criteria is. So that's what we do here. We have set criteria, unless, like Marty, we throw it out the damn window. We have criteria which then can differentiate what normally our answer would be, because we're following guidelines. So with that said, once again, Ricky and Robert, the Rock and Roll Express is my pick.
However,
the
Mike? Winners, tentatively, and I'm going to say tentatively, the Rock and Roll Express for the greatest tag team of all time. Will I use a veto, even though I picked the Rock and Roll Express?
Did Mike make enough of a case?
And Mike, would you consider using your veto in the final? Even though, have we ever talked about using a veto in the finals?
I don't think we have, but I mean, it is your veto, so I'd say you can use it whenever you want.
Oh, you're damn right I can.
Damn.
But I will not in this case. Trust me, I was thinking about it. I was strongly considering it.
Well, I would have just vetoed you, but that's all right.
I just think overall, the Road Warriors, are just, like I've said earlier, they're just on a whole different level all by themselves, like an island by themselves. But, you know what, I'm not going to disrespect Ricky and Robert like that. Yeah, I mean, a hell of a tag team, and yeah, kind of like you said, Tom, I do agree with what you said. The Road Warriors could be carried to a good match, where the Rock and Roll Express could probably have a good match with anybody. They could probably carry the Road Warriors to a good match.
Oh, yeah.
As we know, they had other classic matches with smaller teams, more like themselves, where the Road Warriors probably weren't going to carry a match at all. So, yeah, I'm not going to argue at all with the Rock and Roll Express. I do feel strongly about Hawk and Animal, but not enough to veto Ricky and Robert. So,
and I mean, let's just say here, if we're looking at this and saying that the second greatest tag team in the history of professional wrestling is the Road Warriors, that's not a bad place to come in. I mean, there's a lot of competition in this tournament. And, I don't know if overall any of us would maybe say the Rock and Roll are the greatest of all time. I might. I mean, I think there's a case to be made. But again, I say that where somebody went, wait a minute, you idiot, you guys just crowned them as the champion. But it was who they faced. These brackets are randomly generated, so it's just the competition they faced. They were able to move on, and then using the criteria, they came out the winners, and I think they're a very deserving champion.
And to, let the suspense go, I've decided not to use my veto, and I will go with my pick as well with Leslie. But
have we ever vetoed ourselves?
Not yet, but it's been close.
Yeah.
Guys, this is the Tournament Podcast where matchups are everything. And if you're enjoying this content, again, please consider liking, subscribing, sharing this, and most importantly, comment. Do you agree with our picks? Do you disagree? What should we cover next? With all that being said, we appreciate the support. For my brothers Tom and Mike, this is Marty saying, catch you next time.